Hello everyone. It's James again. And today I want to talk about a very important topic. One that is going to be greatly related to the news story we've been talking about here on this channel for the last several days. The news story regarding the young man that was being held captive in his home for the last 2 decades. Allegedly. By the hands of his stepmother, Kimberly Sullivan. This young man weighed 68 pounds at 5'9". And was on the verge of not living. And figured his last chance to escape was to light his room on fire and collapse on the floor. Not getting up to make sure he was going to be rescued by the firefighters. And in the news video clippings we've seen so far, it appears that Kimberly Sullivan was likely trying to control the scene. Trying to be there when they removed her stepson from the home. And it doesn't seem to be out of care or love or worry. But as we talked about in the last video, control the narrative. Because when the narcissist or evildoer overplays their hand, and they often do, it may take them years if not decades. But they often do. They do whatever they can to make sure they can control what is being said and who it's being said to. Because remember, these types of people are used to triangulating their victims and making sure what's really happening in their house of horrors remains unknown to everyone else. As an example, my narcissist mother got my golden child brother to hate me so much. I was never able to have a conversation with him about anything. So anything I had to say, I would have to say it to my narcissist mother. And she would so-called repeat it to my narcissist golden child brother. And as you can guess, she likely lied and made up whatever she wanted to tell him. Likely lies that would have made my narcissist golden child brother hate me even more. But they also want to use this tactic with anyone else that might discover what is happening inside such a home. So they will make sure you have no way of talking to a particular family member or a school official. But they are the only ones that can. Quite simply so you or no one else can accidentally ruin their story or narrative they are trying to spin. They don't want to chance that you will say something that will trigger these other people to think in a negative way. And the truth is, in some cases with these narcissists or other evildoers, if they haven't mastered the art of charm, these other people might not like them. But they just don't have all of the information to think in a complete negative manner. But here's the thing. In this case with this now young man that escaped, they did have information decades ago. The principal of the school this at the time young boy attended called on numerous instances, reporting the young child's horrible condition. But now we are hearing from the young man's father's brother. Either it's his uncle or great uncle. And this is where the topic of this video comes into play. This uncle or great uncle said they visited due to another family member passing away. And they called protective services after witnessing the condition of at that time this young child. And in those instances, it was reported that the officials showed up at the door. They tried to ask Kimberly Sullivan some questions. She refused to let them in and sent them on their way. And this uncle or great uncle said they kind of backed off because the boy's father was having lots of problems with Kimberly. And as we know, Kimberly is blaming the deceased father of the young man for his condition and treatment when he died over a year ago. Oh. And it's been reported there were locks on the outside of the door. But it's being said, that's not proof he was being held captive. Simply put, the angle the defense is seeming to take is if Kimberly says nothing, it's on the prosecution to prove what happened. And the truth is, that is correct. And in most cases, talking to law enforcement is a bad idea. Because you could have literally done nothing wrong, and talk yourself into being blamed for something you didn't do. But this is a case where most that have witnessed this young man's condition say this is the worst case of abuse they have ever seen. And it's pretty convenient for this woman to blame a man that has been dead for over a year. But the uncle or great-uncle said something extremely important. He and his wife backed off. Because the father of the boy was having problems with Kimberly. And I believe even though I'm leaving room for the idea that the father was part of the abuse too. But the other possibility is she isolated the father first. And then the abuse started from there. Because again, this goes back into what we've been talking about on this case. When we hear about things like this, where a grown adult in a man-woman relationship is scared to leave, and brainwashed to not be able to even think about how to leave, we almost automatically assume the victim in these types of cases are always women. Because this type of thing surely never happens to men. But the truth is, it happens every single day. And this is why this case is so important. As I mentioned before, it's pretty interesting. Every single time there is a group trying to put together a men's shelter for abused men, screaming crazy feminists not only picket the building, but they've been known to call and threaten the building owners and businesses nearby. And you have to ask yourself why? Why would they do such a thing? And the reason why they would do such a thing, in my humble cartoon opinion, is they know if one was able to be opened without pushback, another would open and another and another. And before you know it, it would be nationwide. And then before you know it, it would be in every single Western country. And if that were to happen, you would then have real hard data on the rates. The real rates that men are abused at the hands of women. And then the myth of that women are mainly the victims and that men being victims is just a one-time happening would completely fall apart. And if that were to fall apart, so would at least half of their funding. Because please know, though abused women is a real thing, it's also a business. A billion-dollar business. Of funding and resources and this and that. And if it's shown that women are just as abusive as men, and men need help too, half of those resources would have to go to men. And they do not want to do that. Again, isolation. The feminist making sure men's shelters are never built, are doing it so men that are abused have no voice and no one that will hear them. Just the same as that woman allegedly did with keeping her stepson captive in their home. But again, I wouldn't be shocked if the isolation started with his father. And how does this isolation start? No matter if you are a male victim or a female victim, they might start having unpredictable behavior. Now women can pull this off a lot easier. It's not easy for a man to scream and holler at his girlfriend or wife in public without causing a scene or attention to themselves. But if a woman does it to a man, most people think the man must have done something wrong. But with that said, men can still have unpredictable behavior that is off-putting. So much so, the victim will turn down invitations to birthday parties, get-togethers and having people over to the house. And in doing so, friends and family just kind of fall off and stop reaching out. Because every time they do, they are turned down for spending time together. The other way. And I wouldn't be shocked if this were the case in this instance. But they will make the home unlivable. Meaning they might be a hoarder. Or they might not have the best cleaning habits. They might make the place so disgusting that their victim will be too embarrassed to let people come over to visit. Again, both male and female victims can find themselves in this boat. And when you have an environment that is isolating such as this, they beat you down mentally. Narcissists' partners are always on you to do something. You can never sit and never have a moment's peace. You are told to clean this or take out the trash now. Or to do this project or that project. Never concerned if you have rested enough after a long day's work. They fill your time with anything stressful they can find for you to do. And they verbally abuse you while you are doing such a task. And while doing all of this they will sleep deprive you. They will do this by arguing with you in the middle of the morning. And keep you up all night long. Knowing you have to get up early and work a hard stressful job. And when all of this is going on, all you are concerned about is making it through another day. Every day is a maze of what shoe is going to drop next. They aren't worried about meeting up with their family or friends for tacos or for brunch. They are just worried about surviving. And on top of it, they are completely embarrassed about their situation. So they try to keep everyone away from it. You see, when we see ads on TV or billboards when we drive down the road regarding abuse, it's always a woman with a swollen eye holding a really young child holding a teddy bear or something like that. But what do you think would have happened had there been a men's abuse shelter in this man's area? Meaning the father. That is, if the father was abused too and not part of the problem. But what do you think would have happened? If he drove past a billboard with a picture of an abused man and a 1-800 number to call for emergency help? It's possible he might have called it. And I don't know why he passed away. Maybe he smoked his entire life. Maybe he ate bad food. I have no idea. But what I and everyone here knows, that living with this kind of evil is extremely stressful. And if you are unable to get out in time, it can end your life earlier than expected. I mean, think about it. When it's talked about on any show about how long women live compared to men, it's often seen as something funny. Like hee, women outlive men. But no one looks at why that is. Nor does anyone seem to care. Is it possible some of the factors have to do with underreported abuse and men being the victims of this abuse and dying early due to the stress? And here's the thing. Women can have the same problems. But we live in a society of believe all women. And help all women. And let's create a shelter and get funding. But the pain of men and boys is laughed at and ridiculed. There are t-shirts for little girls to wear that says throw rocks at boys. And all kinds of other evil things. And it's all accepted. And we have to ask, how did all of this come to be? And that's where I would direct you and anyone that will listen to look up Erin Pizzi. She's still living by the love and grace of God. As I believe she's in her 90s. And she was at the head of the feminist movement in the 60s and 70s. And when she realized that women were just as abusive as men, her dog was deleted. And her life was threatened. So much so she had to flee England for more than 10 years. All because they didn't want her to help men just as much as she was helping women. Because her goal was to help keep the family unit together and teach people how to manage their behaviors and understand the root cause of their dysfunctions. For those that would be good candidates for this. Because she realized there were both men and women that were just evil, that were beyond help. But Erin quickly learned. Helping keep the family intact was never the goal of the feminist movement. However, their goal was to create a world where the family unit only consisted of the women and children, not the men. And she's got their literature from back then to back all of this up. And though she's English or British, she grew up for a time in communist China. Because her father was some sort of diplomat there. And he and his wife were held captive by China for a period of time. So Erin is familiar with the tactics of communists. And in her words, she noticed the same exact Marxist communist behaviors and methods being used by the feminist of her day. She stated that most, not all but most of the women that were part of that movement, were highly disturbed violent women. And because their fathers were bad, they deemed all men to be bad. This would be like those of us here that had narcissist mothers. To deem all women and mothers to be bad. When we know that's not the case. There are decent women just like there are decent men. The problem is, the feminists were successful at pushing their agenda through. To where the police and other officials looked at the man in almost all situations as the wrongdoer and the women as the victim. And when you do that, you leave a wide open field for narcissist women to play on. Because no one is even thinking or considering they are up to any kind of evil. And thus it's even more easier for them to isolate their victim. And as I've stated before, I wouldn't be shocked if she did all of the talking when the protective services were called on the home. And according to the uncle or great-uncle, that's what appears to have happened. And because the feminist of Aaron Pizzi's day pushed through this evil propaganda that the men are always the wrongdoer, I believe this is likely the reason why they just let things go when Kimberly Sullivan refused to answer their questions. Quite simply because they didn't have any kind of protocol to move forward with. Because when it's a man deemed to be the abuser, they likely would have went back to their office to have a judge sign off on a warrant to get into that house to at least see the condition of the child, or request the child be brought outside. But when they run into a woman, it's like do not compute. They don't have a comeback. Well, she said nothing is going on. Let's file the case as closed and time to move on. But if it's a man, don't you think it's fishy he doesn't want us to see the child? Maybe we should get a court order to have him bring the child outside so we can check his condition. You see, there is no protocol because the feminist of Aaron Pizzi's day made darn sure that there was no protocol. It's men that are the problem. And they made sure they hammered that point home. There's always a reason for the violence of a wife or girlfriend or mother. But there is never a reason for even speaking loudly for a boyfriend, husband or father. If everything is shaping up the way it's looking to my cartoon eyes, this could be a good case study as to why shelters for men should be built, and we need to take these situations even more seriously. Both men and women can be and are abused at the same rate. It's time to question. Why don't they want the masses to know this fact? Maybe it's because they are working on the communist model. Destroy the family unit. Something to think about. With that said, I will leave a link in the box below of the uncle or great-uncle speaking to the news about how he called protective services. I would like to know what you all think about it. With that said, I do hope your day is blessed. And until next time, bye for now. And be good to yourself.